Senator Sanders, thank you so much for coming to speak to people in Español and people Chica. We are so excited to have you here today.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you very much for having me.
And the American Latino community has been paying very close attention to your campaign and the very interesting things that you're saying about how you're going to improve America. And we're eager to see how we fit into this picture and what we can do to help. So we thought we would talk about 3 areas that are important to the community that we've been discussing, particularly at People in Español and at People Chica, and those have to do with healthcare and the jobs, the economy, as well as the environment.
Great.
So I'm just going to sort of kick it off right away. We are going live right now on Facebook Live, so we're going to have questions coming up from there as well. So healthcare, access to healthcare. Which entity is fundamentally responsible for funding the nation's care, and why?
It's got to be the federal government. And what we have got to do is what every other major country on earth is already doing. Mm-hmm. And that is provide health care to every man, woman, and child as a right, not a privilege. Mm-hmm. Now, the current system that we have is dominated by the insurance companies and the drug companies. Mm-hmm. And I think most Americans understand that the function of our current healthcare system is not to provide quality care to all, but to make billions and billions of dollars in profit for the drug companies and the insurance companies. So at the end of the day, this is where we are. We are spending, as a nation, twice as much per person on healthcare as do the people of any other major country. And yet we have 34 million people with no health insurance, even more who are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments, and we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That's the bad news. But here's the good news. The drug companies last year made over $69 billion in profit. 5 major insurance companies made over $20 billion in profit. And what we have got to move toward is a system, not which makes huge profits for the drug companies and the insurance companies, but one in which all people have health care without deductibles, without co-payments, without premiums.
And that's so interesting. So at the last debate, when the moderators asked who on the stage would eliminate the private insurance exchange, you were one of the few people who raised your hand. And so I think that some people are alarmed by the idea that there would be no more private exchange because they equate that with lack of access to good doctors. And so I want to ask you, would you really eradicate the private exchange entirely, or how would you do it?
Let me just say this. In the fight for a Medicare for all system, right now, if you're 65 years of age, you have access to the most popular healthcare program in the country. It is called Medicare. And all that I'm trying to do is over a 4-year period, provide Medicare for all of our people. First year, it will go down to 55, then 45, then 35. We cover all of the children immediately, and we expand health care benefits to seniors who are on Medicare by providing dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses. Right now, there are millions of people who have health insurance who cannot go to the doctor that they want to go because their doctor is in another network. We eliminate all that. Under our plan, everybody can go to any doctor they want to, which is the case for Medicare right now. You go to any hospital that you want. We are taking on the drug companies and the insurance companies who will spend probably hundreds of millions of dollars trying to defeat us, and they will lie a lot. They will say, well, under Bernie's plan, people don't have access to the doctor of their choice. That is an absolute lie. People will be able to go to any doctor that they want. And the other thing that Medicare for All does, and I want you to think about this, if everybody in this country has health care as a right, people will no longer have to stay on jobs where they're really not happy.
Just fascinating, right?
I mean, how many people do we know who are saying, well, I don't like my job, but at least I have decent health care for my family? We eliminate that. And when you lose your job and you're unemployed, you have health insurance. And when you go to a new job, you have health insurance, freedom of choice, and lower prescription drug costs. So we think that this is the future of where the American people want to go. We have to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies. But at the end of the day, I am confident that we're going to win this struggle. Healthcare is a human right, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. The United States, again, only major country on earth not to guarantee that right.
So you talk about the U.S. being the only country who doesn't guarantee that right. You brought up pricing with prescription drugs. How do you change the American mindset so that they understand that pricing needs to be controlled?
Good.
How do we make people unafraid of that?
Oh, they're not afraid of it. All right, you raise an important issue, which is kind of what our campaign is about. If you go out, go down, take a walk down the street and say to people, what do you think about the pharmaceutical industry? And they will say, they understand that the pharmaceutical industry is incredibly greedy. Top 10 companies, $69 billion in profits last year. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. Older people are cutting their prescription drug pills in half. So it's not what the American people want. The American people want us to stand up to the pharmaceutical industry. But the drug companies have incredible power and incredible wealth. So here's my promise to the American people, to the people in the Latino community and every other community. We will cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. And if you are lower income or working class, as part of the Medicare for All system, you will pay very, very little for your prescription drugs. It is insane that people today who get sick cannot afford the medicine that they need. So the question is, can the American people stand up to the power of the pharmaceutical industry? And as president, we will do that.
And so how, for instance, would you lead them in doing that? Is it more direct communication with the people?
Well, first of all, we have legislation. And this is what we have 3 pieces of legislation. Number 1, we have Medicare negotiating prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. This is what every other country on earth is doing. Second of all, we're saying to you that if in Canada you can purchase insulin or a drug that you need at a fraction of the cost, your pharmacist or prescription drug distributor should be able to get that product from Canada or other countries and allow it to be sold in this country at far lower prices than the drug companies are now selling them. Third point, and this is what Canada kind of does, is that we look at the average cost of drugs, prescription drugs, all over the world. And in the United States, so this is what our legislation says, is we tell the drug companies, this is what you're going to charge. It's what the average of the 5 or 6 other countries are charging us. And when we do that, we lower prescription drug cost by 50%. We cut it in half in America. And you know, I am sick and tired, to be frank with you, about the drug companies making billions when so many people just cannot afford the medicine they desperately need. That is not moral, that's not right. We're going to change that.
Wonderful. This takes me to another section, which is the jobs in the economy.
Good.
And there is an extraordinary burden of my generation to fund not only our retirements, but our children's college tuition. And I'm curious how you're going to make that easier for my generation. And
Well,
for
your
Latinos.
generation, and let's be very clear about it, okay? And thank you for asking me this question. President Trump says that the economy is booming, okay? Well, in a sense, he's right. If you are on Wall Street, you will know that last year, the major 5 Wall Street banks made $110 billion in profits. It's booming. In America today, you got 3 individuals, 1, 2, 3, who own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. You got the top 1% who own more wealth than the bottom 92%. You got CEOs of large corporations making 300 times what their workers are making. So what we have is a very unfair and immoral economy in which the people on top are doing phenomenally well. But what's the other side of the equation? This is what you're talking about. Your generation, by the way, will have the dubious distinction of being the first generation in the modern history of America to have a lower standard of living than your parents. The wages that you are earning in real inflation for dollars are lower than what your parents made. Many people in your generation have left school deeply, deeply in debt, student debt, and it is very difficult for your generation to buy the first, much more difficult than your parents to buy your first home, which is how you accumulate wealth.
Yep.
Do I hit the mark with you on all of that?
Absolutely.
All right, there it is.
My siblings and me.
All right, but that's millions and millions of people. So what do we do? Well, what we do is we say, first of all, that we need an economy that works for everybody, not just the 1%. So what we do is, for a start, for low-wage workers, and there are tens of millions of them who are trying to get by on $10, $12 an hour. We're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, and that is $15 an hour, okay? And we're going to make it easier for workers to join unions. So that's number one. Number two, education is the key to success in today's economy. If you want to get a good paying job, in most cases, you're going to need to get a higher education, as you've just indicated. There are a lot of people who cannot afford to go to college, or they can't afford to get the training they need to be a carpenter or a sheet metal worker or a plumber. What we do is we have legislation that we will implement and fight for as president, which makes public colleges and universities tuition free. And also, we cancel all student debt in America. Now, you're probably saying, that's a nifty idea, but how are you going to pay for it? Did I read your mind?
You did.
All right. So the way we pay for it is by telling Wall Street, where they have been enormously profitable, but you'll remember that 11 years ago, what happened in this country? As a result of the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior on Wall Street, they came running to Congress for the biggest bailout in the history of this country. $700 billion from the Treasury, trillions of dollars in low-interest loans from the Federal Reserve. What we propose is a modest tax on Wall Street speculation, which will pay for more than, it'll pay for everything that we want to do. Free public colleges and universities, forgiving all student debt in America, and then we have some left over for other things.
What about this idea, though, that when it's free, it's not valued? Is that something that you
I don't
believe
believe
in?
that's the case. Look, the way I look at it is everybody understands from a human point of view. Learning, we all want to learn as human beings. It's an intricate, essential part of what we are as human beings. But in today's economy, the truth is you need a good education to make it into the middle class. 40 or 50 years ago, the truth was that if you had a high school degree, you could go out and get a good job.
Right.
All right, but that's not the case anymore. So 100 years ago, what people in this country fought for is free public education from first grade through 12th grade, correct? All right.
That's right.
Well, the world has changed. The global economy has changed. Technology has changed. The economy has changed. So it is not a radical idea to say that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. And by the way, here's something that many people may not know. 40, 50 years ago, great universities in the United States of America, public universities, like the University of California, or the University of the City of New York. Do you know how much it cost to go there then?
Free?
Virtually free. So you didn't know that.
I did not know that.
So the question is, if we could provide virtually free public education, tuition free, 50 years ago, why can't we do it today? Why can't we do what Germany is? You know how much it costs to go to college in Germany? Free. You know how much it costs to go to college in Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark?
France.
Free. All right. Those countries are investing in their young people. They want the best educated workforce that they can create. And that's what we have got to do. This is not a radical idea. Okay? It is insane that hundreds of thousands of bright young people cannot afford to go to college, and 45 million people are dealing with student debt. In some cases, really horrific levels of student debt. High interest rates, people can't afford to get married, have kids, buy their own home, even buy a car. That is crazy, and that's why we propose and will fight to cancel all student debt in America. And we pay for that through a modest tax on Wall Street speculation.
Through Wall Street. Another economic burden for American Latinos and other communities, obviously, is child care,
Yes.
but also family
Yes.
care. As president, how would you incentivize your colleagues in government and the nation itself to develop a high-quality universal child care program? What does this program look like, and how would we pay for something
Shirley,
like this?
you're asking exactly the right question. All right. Again, I really, what our campaign is about really is asking people to think outside of the box. Don't believe everything you see on television as normal. Right? It is not normal that 500,000 people will sleep out on the streets of America today. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. It is not normal that an average working class family, whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're Latino, cannot find in New York City or Burlington, Vermont, quality, affordable childcare, when you know and I know, and every psychologist in this country knows, that the most important years of human development are 0 through 4. Why do we not have good quality childcare? Why do we not put money into childcare workers so they earn a decent wage? Why do we not do that rather than give $1.5 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large corporations? So what this campaign is about is rethinking a new vision for America. And this is not a radical vision. In countries around the world, they understand quality childcare is a right of all parents and is necessary for child development. We can do it. We can have strong public schools. We can make public colleges and universities tuition free. We can cancel student debt. We can rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. But to do all of those things, we have to deal with one reality, and that is the courage to take on the powerful special interest. And I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with this, all right? But we have got to ask ourselves, should we be giving huge tax breaks to billionaires and then telling working class families in the Latino community, in the black community, in the white community, sorry, we just don't have enough money to provide you with quality childcare. So at the top, when I talk about education, it is quality childcare, strong public education, after school programs for kids, summer programs for kids. We can do all of those things because we're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We just have to change our national priorities.
But who's the we in changing the national priorities? Who is it that's not activating this agenda? Because we're expecting our trusted leaders to do our public leaders to do this. So who?
Our leaders are not so trusted anymore,
right?
Because I think that many people now understand that most of the people in Congress, and certainly this president, who is a racist and a xenophobe and a sexist and a religious bigot, that right now I think most people understand that Washington, D.C. is not there to represent ordinary Americans, but is there to represent wealthy campaign contributors. So you got people out there who are spending, billionaires, who put hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns, and Congress is listening to them, not to the needs of working people. So what we have got to do as a nation, and what this campaign is about, the message of our campaign is us, not me. I can't do it alone. Millions of people have got to stand up and fight for justice in this country. And justice means quality education for all, regardless of your income. It means that you don't give tax breaks to billionaires and then cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Once again, we got to think out of the box, and we have to ask ourselves, where do we want to go as a country? Do we cherish our children? Well, I do. We should not have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the Latino community, in the black community, of virtually any country on earth. We have got to change our national priorities. We have got to stand up to the 1% and entities like Wall Street, the insurance companies, the drug companies, and the fossil fuel industry.
Senator, I'm so curious about how it is that you stay in touch with the ordinary American, especially when having worked in Washington for so many years. What is it that you do to keep your finger on the pulse or understand?
In my own state, which is a small state, I've been to almost every town in the state, and we have held, I expect, more town meetings than any elected official in the history of the state of Vermont. Now, history goes way, way back. So, and on the campaign trail, there's not a day that goes by where I will not talk with ordinary people in one context or another. I see my job is to represent the working class of this country, the middle class of this country, and that is why I'm very proud that we have, up till now, if you can believe this, we have received some 2 million individual campaign contributions. 2 million. We think this is an all-time world's record for this stage of a campaign. They average something like $19 a piece.
Wow. Well, congratulations. We only have a few minutes, so I want to get very quickly just a quick question about the environment. This June was the hottest month for the entire planet, especially Europe. Based on environmental news, it seems that we're at a precipice of self-destruction. Yes. How will you communicate to the masses the urgency of this matter? And do businesses and citizens need to be forced to care through various forms of taxation? Or how are you going to communicate the urgency?
Well, what the scientific community tells us is that we are facing an existential threat. And that means if we do not act extremely aggressively and boldly, there will be, within the next 12 years, damage done to this country and to the world that is irreparable, okay? And as you indicate, in Europe, in India, in Australia, all over this world, we're seeing unprecedented levels of heat waves, we're seeing floods, we're seeing droughts, extreme weather disturbances. As president, I will take on the fossil fuel industry. Right now, fossil fuel industry is making billions of dollars every single year lying about the damage they're doing to our planet, buying and selling politicians with campaign contributions, lobbying extensively. We have a president who embarrassingly does not believe in science and thinks climate change as a hoax. My job as president, because America can't do it alone, is to tell the rest of the world that instead of spending $1.5 trillion on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we should all work together and use that money to combat our common enemy, which is climate change. But this is a real threat to our planet, and we have got to make sure that our kids and our grandchildren live in a country and a world that is healthy and habitable.
So speaking of that, Latino and Black communities across the country live in these places that are disproportionately affected by pollution and the environmental problems, and also the health-related conditions that go along with that. How will you educate and galvanize our communities to act in the interest of the environment?
Well, it's not only educating and galvanizing the communities, it is taking on those that are polluting. You're right. Often major sources of pollution is dumped into low-income communities, which are often Latino or African American. And we're going to stop that. I mean, children have a right to grow up in a healthy environment. We have epidemics of asthma in this country, which has a lot to do with pollution. We have kids who are drinking water that's unhealthy, breathing air that is unhealthy. So what we need to do is to say that in America, our goal is not to allow large corporations to pollute our country and destroy our environment. They must be held accountable.
Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about being labeled a socialist. Many have labeled you as a socialist, and it often comes as an attack.
Yes.
Are you in fact a socialist? And if so, how do you define the label?
Good question. I am a democratic socialist. And by that, I mean that the time is long overdue to deal with the wealth and inequality in this country. It is morally unacceptable that a handful of people have so much wealth and so much power. That's number one. Number two, whether you call it democratic socialism, whether you call it social democracy, whether you call it progressive government, I want to do what countries all over the world are already doing. You asked me about childcare. I'm sure you know that there are countries all over the world where you have quality childcare for the kids that is affordable to the parents. Talk about parental leave. Do you know what, in Norway, if you have a baby, do you know what you get in Norway?
A year?
Yeah. You get a year at 80%, or I think 10 months at 100% of your salary. Yeah, I'm not lying. That's true. Sweden, Denmark, it is similar. Every other country guarantees health care to all people. In Germany, Scandinavia, you go to college. You know how much it costs? Nothing. You go to graduate school, you go to medical school. In other words, they have governments which have developed programs that work for all of the people, not tax breaks for billionaires or subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. So to me, whether you call it socialism or social democracy or progressive government, I want to see this country, this great country, do what other countries around the world are already doing. I do not want to see 500,000 people tonight sleeping out on the streets, okay? I want to invest in affordable housing, which deals not only with homelessness, but the fact that you have millions of people in this country who are spending 55% of their limited incomes in housing. We're talking about gentrification all over this country. Build affordable housing. In other words, all that word socialism means to me is creating a government which works for the needs of ordinary people, not just the 1%.
One last question. How will you beat President Trump? That, I think, is what many of us want to know. If we're gonna throw our support behind you, we want to make sure that you can beat him. He has divided many communities.
Yes, he has.
He has divided Latinos from Muslims, from women and disabled people.
You got it.
How do you beat that kind of negative rhetoric?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that in virtually all of the polls that have been done, I think almost every poll, I beat Trump, sometimes by double digits. In the key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, we are way, way, way ahead of him. And the way we will beat him is doing exactly the opposite of what he is doing, as you've just indicated. His whole political strategy, it is so disgusting, it is unbelievable, is to divide us up. You're Latino, you're black, you're white, you're Muslim, you're Jewish, you're Christian. Let me see how many people I can divide up and get people to hate each other. Our strategy is exactly the opposite. It is to bring people together. You're gay, you're straight, you're in. You are Muslim or Jewish or Christian, you are in. You are black or white or Latino, Native American, Asian American, you're in, because we are all Americans and we all have common needs. And we're going to stand together against bigotry, against hatred, against racism, and that's how we're going to beat them.
Thank you so much, Senator. That was just a wonderful conversation. Thank you for coming here today.
Well, thank you for
We'll
inviting me.
continue watching your campaign.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.